welcome to Real People, Real Matters. This is Diana Tolchinsky with my first guest, Julie Simon. Julie, can you tell me about Tiny Clay Books exhibition in the Glenview Library?
Sure. So I recently had an exhibition at the library of my tiny clay books, which are just what they sound like. So they're 1-inch by 1-inch renditions in clay of kind of some of my favorite books. So a lot of them are bestsellers. I did some children's books. I did some nonfiction, and just things that I was sort of captivated by. And I started making these during the pandemic. And I'd read an article in the New York Times about this woman who cured her pandemic anxiety by making tiny clay foods. So I read this article and I decided I really wanted to make something out of clay. So my daughter and I ordered all this clay off of Amazon, and we started with foods, and we made some plants and succulents and fruits. But I really wanted to make something that I loved, and I love books, and so I just started making the books that I was reading in 2020, and then that kind of morphed into many, many other books, and so it eventually became an art exhibit at the Glenview Public Library, which was a great place to display them in our beautiful library right there in the lobby. So.
How was the reception like? Meet the Artist?
It was fabulous. So we had that in December, and it was a wonderful, wonderful evening. And we had, I want to say, like 75 guests there. It was one of the largest and most well-attended Meet the Artists. And it was just a great night. So many people came out to see the tiny clay books, and the librarians were there. They were really instrumental in getting this going and helping me figure out the design and the layout of how they would be displayed. I did them in 6x6 shadow boxes, all of them. So it was very, very uniform. And yeah, I had tons of friends and neighbors from all over Glenview, the city. I had people flying in from Ohio to see it that night. There was a New York Times bestselling author there in attendance that evening, Christy Tate, whose book Group is fabulous, and she has a new book coming out called BFF in February. So.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Julie, how did you get connected to the library?
Yeah, so the Tiny Clay Books have their own Instagram, which I started, I think, in 2021, where I feature the clay book and then a picture of the actual cover of the book, and then I pull my favorite quote from the book, which has been really fun. And I also write a review of the book. So it's been a really great practice for me to continue my writing, and it's been really fun to have followers that are interested in it who love tiny clay books. One of those followers was Lindsay Dorfman, who is the director of the Glenview Public Library, and we have a mutual friend who said, hey, I bet you should talk to Lindsay and see if the library would like to hook up with you. So I did, and the librarians, as I said, have been they were great, and I worked with them to get the exhibit going and get it all hung in the hallway, and they did a great job with that installation.
And what is the future for Tiny Clay Books? Are they going anywhere?
They are. They are going to a little gallery in Evanston called Artem Gallery. It's on Sherman Avenue, and they will be there as of mid-February.
Do you have like a background in writing or in English?
I do. I was an English major in college, and I've always been interested in writing, and in college really pursued that as my degree. And then one of my first jobs out of college was working for Encyclopedia Britannica, where I was an editor. And I did a lot of writing there. I did all sorts of things for Britannica.com, which was our digital website on using the encyclopedia and current news, things like that. And then I eventually was there. I wrote a lot of contributed to the children's encyclopedia.
And have you ever thought of writing children's books, or do you have a background in teaching?
I have taught. I taught at the University of Illinois at Chicago. I taught composition. I love children's books. I haven't really thought about writing a children's book. I have thought about writing books. I'm not sure that I have a novel idea in me, but it's something as I get older I think about, and I'm trying to pursue a little more of my interest in writing. I recently opened a writing consultancy where I work with high school students on their college essays. So that's been really exciting and a great outlet for practicing writing with kids and helping them along this path.
For university-bound students, like how does the essay like open doors or close doors?
That's a great question. I think the essay is super important right now. What you see in college admissions is a lot of schools going test optional, which was something that really even increased during COVID. So with test optional, you know, your profile is really just a numbers game of your grades, that what they're seeing, and some of your activities. So the essay really lets you stand out. I like to think of it as the soul of your application to show who you really are. And it's a daunting process for kids to try to express themselves when, you know, they're 18 years old. They don't feel like they've had that many life experiences, but everybody has something to write about, and oftentimes it's in those smaller moments in life that you can kind of find something for a student to write about that's really important to them, that shows who they are.
Like how does like even like writing like open pathways to like I would say the Ivy Leagues or like those like graduate programs where it's like 4 + 2 years?
Yeah, I think communication is so important in any field you go into. And that's sort of what drew me into, I was an English major, English writing major, and a communications minor. And I think for anyone to succeed in honestly any field, communication is the key to that success. It's interesting in the news today. You'll see a lot about ChatGPT, which is a artificial intelligence that will write your essay for you. We're hoping that the world doesn't go this way, and that people still are able to express themselves. I think it's interesting to see these AI programs that can kind of do things on a very standardized. If you feed them the right information, they could write a press release for you that would be probably about right, but there's always going to be, I hope, literature in the world and books and communications that really express the human nature side of communication.
Like how do students actually excel in school with public speaking and communication, like professional writing, even like a hobby as creative writing or poetry?
Yeah.
Like, how does that like steer people into like professional studies?
Yeah, I think anyone has to communicate. A doctor, an engineer, a lawyer, all of those people, whether it's public speaking, whether it's one-to-one interpersonal communication. I think it's really important that everyone has those skills, and high school and college is a great time to kind of hone those activities and think about how you're going to use them in the real world.
And like when you back to your teaching days, like how did any of your like students have like success stories, or like do you have any like in your past like students that were struggling and all of a sudden they excelled?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see all across the board different scenarios, and certainly I worked with a lot of students who are non-native English speakers at UIC, and that was really challenging for them. But I found that people, once you start writing and speaking and communicating more and more, as the semester progressed, people were so much more comfortable with it, even as non-native English speakers.
And why did you become a corporate writer instead of a professor in English?
Well, I decided sort of Britannica, when I was there, was really honestly like one of my dream jobs. I always sort of loved the encyclopedia. I had a distant relative who was sort of mythologized in my family as someone who'd had an entire career there, and she was an older woman in her 80s by the time I started working there. And so when I got the job at Britannica, I felt like I was really in the right spot, and I didn't really want to pursue a PhD, which would have required like 4 more years of education. And I didn't need that for that job, so I was really happy to be there. I reconnected with my distant relative who actually still lived in Chicago. And we became great friends. And I heard lots of stories about the old days at Britannica. And I actually have a lot of memorabilia from her, like a replica of one of the original sets, lots of different, I have the printing press ink mark for
Wow.
an original set. So it was, we had a great friendship. She had actually married someone she met at Britannica, and I also met my husband at Britannica. So
Oh, wow.
we had a lot in common.
How long were you working there?
I was there about 4 years.
Interesting. And can you tell me more about like your experience there, about like the printing press versus like the digital world? Like
Yeah.
how different is that in the
So
era?
it's interesting. I was there in the early 2000s, so it was very much the time when the .com era was booming. So I worked specifically on Britannica.com, and since then they've stopped actually printing the books and they only do online. So it was kind of in the day of trying to figure out where they were going with all of that. So Britannica.com was kind of like a news magazine at the time. We were trying to keep daily fresh content. We had a lot of interesting news articles that we would link back to an article in the encyclopedia. So it was a really unique, interesting job at the time.
How big is social media compared to like that era when like it just first started? Like how important is that? Like and how like especially opinions like bad or good, like there's so misinformation to compare
Yeah.
to the old encyclopedia where they had like the paper and everything else. Now you can just Google everything and then just like voila.
Yeah, my kids don't even know what we have a set of the encyclopedias at home, but they rarely use them because there's Wikipedia. But it was Britannica is like triple fact checked, and the sourcing of everything is just 100% verified, which is a lot of what I had to do when I was writing the children's encyclopedia. There was a lot of just fact checking and calling different states to make sure that this was accurate, and it was we don't see that anymore, sadly. I think it's hard to know if your source is super accurate. Britannica still exists in a digital form, and people can still use it, and it still has all of those fact-checking mechanisms in place. But I think students, tend to, and I think a lot of people know what's real and what's not online.
Oh, okay.
But I think you have to be super careful, and you can't just trust the first source that you find.
And do you come from a background of educators?
I do. Actually, both of my parents met as college professors at Bradley University in Peoria. My dad was a math professor, and my mom was at the School of Speech Therapy. And she moved to Peoria to teach there, and then married my dad. So they had a lot of influence on my upbringing, and sort of drove a lot of my interest in writing, and really helped me kind of foster that and encouraged me with it.
And for your undergraduate university, where did you go for that bachelor's degree?
Sure, I went to DePauw with a W, DePauw University in Greencastle, Indiana, which is a small private liberal arts school.
How do you find students do you favor private liberal colleges versus those massive state colleges and universities?
In my essay consulting business, I take anyone who wants to go anywhere, honestly. That's up to them. I don't steer people into which schools exactly. They come to me with kind of where they want to apply and what their essay questions are. So, with my own children, I'm trying to help them figure out sort of what would be a good fit for them, because there are so many differences in the size and the course of study and the geography of where you are that people have to consider when they're thinking about schools.
Do you have any tips for families trying to send their kids to the right school?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many resources out there to help. I know I have a daughter who's a junior, and we're working on this right now with her. And there are so many resources online Big Future is one that we've been using lately to help us build a list for colleges. And you can really kind of, we've got all the books and everything, which are the books that I had, the Fisk Guide and the Princeton Review Guide. So I think, some of these, Big Future was really interesting to me because there's a search engine built in it that you basically can check off, I want these criteria: population, geography, study, and then it feeds back to you, these 47 schools look like they would be a good fit for you. So it's really effective, I think, and helps you think about like places you wouldn't even know about. And then with financial aid, that is a whole different package. And, there's a lot of merit-based scholarships out there that requires a lot of research. And, there are some people who consultants who specialize in helping kids with filling out their FAFSA forms and kind of identifying those specific scholarships that might be applicable for them.
And do you have any specific advice for parents for people that are going to med school versus the arts? Do you favor community colleges or do you favor straight ahead going to the university bound?
Yeah, I think community college has changed over the years, and I think for many, many kids, it's a great option right now. I think after COVID, you saw that was a great option for people who, weren't quite ready to go somewhere, didn't know, people are taking more of a gap year, things like that. I think I don't have any opinions on, what a certain student should do if I don't know their full history. I think everyone charts their own path, and I think community college can be a great path to success for many people.
And then, for the students you actually work with, what's a typical essay, and how long do you spend your time with them?
Sure. So the core of what I do is what's called the Common App essay. So it's a 650-word essay. It is basically what's required by most schools for admission. So it's part of the application. So with 650 words doesn't sound like a whole lot. That's about a page and a half of an essay. So it takes a while, though, and most students I try to work with in a course a condensed time frame. So let's get this done in 4 weeks is kind of what I suggest. I'm pretty flexible on that, but I find that you don't want to string this out and have them come back to this document that they have been working on forever. So I like to kind of do that in a shortened time frame. So there's the Common App. Then a lot of people have supplemental essays. So this fall and winter, I saw a lot of the supplementals come through where, I had one student who had 15 supplemental essays for various schools. So it can be a really daunting job, especially for someone who's, in the midst of their, senior year in college or in high school, trying to juggle all of the things that they have to do. And then you have all these essays on top of it.
Oh, yes.
But I certainly always let the student write the essay, and I try to guide them the best as I can. And, I start with some students, even just who have no idea, just kind of trying to suss out, what a good story would be for them. So, I do have a lot of icebreaker exercises I use with people that help me get to know them so that they might say something that I can go back to and say, hey, you told me this in the beginning, and I'd like to, let's talk about that as a story that, maybe it's something they do every day that, is kind of just a habit that they have or whatever. And that could be the crux of the essay. So we try to find that little nugget, and, I tell people you don't have to send your kid on a mission trip to Peru or something,
Those study abroads can be very exotic.
Yeah. So you can find, find that interesting characteristic in sort of those daily moments that are smaller.
And can you tell me for the college board, breakdown, the boards, what are they looking for? They're looking for GPAs, scholastics, activities,
Yeah,
breakdown?
That's a great question. There's a lot that they're looking for, and to be honest, they're trying to fill, across the board what they need in their class. So a lot of times you won't know exactly what they're looking for, and you can look at two people who have very similar backgrounds and say, well, what was it about this one? And maybe this one played the tuba and they needed a tuba player in their marching band. Or there's that kind of, you just really don't know. I think, largely what people are admissions are looking for is, someone who can succeed on their campus. So what I try to do in the essay is, let's have this story that we're telling illustrate how you will be successful on campus. You might bring something unique to campus that they don't already have, and how you'll appreciate the resources and the experiences of this particular school.
Mm-hmm. And can you tell me like the name of your business in Glenview?
Sure, it's called Write On, WRITE, College Essay. And I have a
nice.
website, writeoncollegeessay.com.
How long have you been living in the Glenview area? Just wondering.
Yeah, so we moved here in 2010. And we moved from the city, my husband and my two kids. So.
And why did you choose this particular suburb versus everything else in North Shore area?
Yeah. We looked around, and honestly, Glenview had such a great feel to it. We really liked the people. It just seemed like a great place to raise our family. The Park District was amazing. The schools were amazing. Coming from the city, I legitimately camped out for a Chicago Park District event for my kids one night,
yes.
so I could get them into the right gymnastics class. And I came here, and I remember walking up to the Park Center desk with Tammy, who I got to know really well when I was registering my kids for various activities. And they were, oh, it's open, just sign up. That's great, do that. Yeah. So it's been wonderful.
And how do you like the high schools and the junior high? Like they really push literacy programs and bilingual education and then creative writing, poetry, like that's always.
Yes, I have two kids at GBS right now, and I have to say I just have been, thrilled with the experience there. They're having a great time. They're getting a great education. They really like the atmosphere. Mm-hmm. I think GBS has such a positivity to it. There's so much support and encouragement for kids that it's just a great experience.
Are they into athletics or other like type of creative writing like you used to be?
They are not into writing, but that's okay. They're charting their own path, both of them. So my son is a runner at GBS, so he does cross country and track, and my daughter is a basketball player.
Oh, nice. And then have you traveled outside the United States or thinking about foreign languages, picking that up?
Yeah. I have traveled. I studied abroad actually myself in college over the summer. One summer, traveled through Europe, which was fabulous, and I've been back a couple times and really enjoyed it. Hoping to get the kids to Europe soon. My daughter's actually going to Norway this summer on a program, so she's really excited about that, and now I want to go to Norway because it looks so beautiful.
And now I'm just wondering, like basic with your like math education, or like your background with like your parents, was that like applied technology and applied science like emphasized like during the years, or how do you see the difference now? Where everybody has their Microsoft digital, like everything's digital software and everything else compared to the old microscope and the lab technology.
Yeah. Well, I think the digital revolution has been a great thing for society. When I see my kids on their phones, but
Oh yeah, Wisent and Varsity Tutors and all those like type of like help.
Yeah. But I think we actually had we had a computer in our house early when I was growing up because my dad was involved with the university and a professor. So it's shocking how far we've come with that and how it's kind of opened up resources to everyone.
And do you have any plans for expanding your business at all?
Yeah, so my business has been going great, and I meet with kids in Glenview. I meet with kids on Zoom. So I had kids from all over the U.S., honestly, already. So from New York and Texas, Indiana. So I'm hoping that it just continues to grow. I am only one person, so I have to kind of manage that. But I've just so enjoyed getting to know these kids and learn what they're all about. It honestly makes me so hopeful for the future. Kids doing wonderful things for the environment, with science, with music and the arts. It's really just encouraging.
And thank you, Julie Simon, for this interesting conversation about English and tiny books.
Thank you, Diana. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for watching Real People, Real Matters with Diana Tolchinsky and my guest, Julie Simon.